Holy Saturday in the aftermath of trauma. This will be 2, possibly 3 weeks, depending on how engaged we are in this study. And I'm very much looking forward to teaching this and hearing your all's response to this kind of reimagining the theology of Holy Week in a new way. And since we are a trauma-informed church, I think it also allows us to talk about the things that are part of the foundational principles of the church as well. So if you will, just with me, I've been doing mind-body stuff, so you're going to have to sit up straight or backwards or however you want to, or if you're laying down, find a comfortable position, maybe get the tension out of your shoulders, your heads a little bit or whatever. And so we can prepare ourselves to be in this space together. Holy Saturday, in the aftermath of trauma. I'm going to give you a little brief overview, and then we're going to look at Holy Saturday from like a biblical lens. We'll look how it works, how that whole week of Easter works on the Jewish calendar, and then we'll get into the crux of it. But when I started to think about how to present this topic, I found myself struggling to remember from my Catholic roots and others, what the heck is Holy Saturday and why do we call it certain things? Because much of the Protestant tradition does not, from Thursday to Sunday, doesn't have any rituals and things often to honor the Good Friday and the Holy Saturday. So I think if we all get on the same page of kind of where we are, but also don't be surprised, because I will ask you all after the little introduction, I'd like to go around for those who wish to participate. Where did Jesus go between his death on the cross and his appearance on what we believe to be Sunday, or what we call Easter? So love to hear what you all think before we go into all this discussion of it, okay? So I'm learning to give you all a heads up before I ask you to answer a question, you know? Otherwise, it's like being in school. What is amazing about the Christian tradition is that a very traumatic event lies at the heart of Christianity. We never call it a trauma event. We say, oh, cross, crucifixion, you know, but really everything, how we understand the resurrection, how we understand Jesus, how we understand the earlier part of the narration of Jesus's story are all informed by this horrific death at the hands of the Romans. And there's throughout time, and much theology was really a struggle, earnest theology was really a struggle to answer that question, why did Jesus die, if he was the Messiah? And then, of course, I think when you look at a trauma-informed lens, it may help us to rethink what it means to go from death to resurrection, right? We go from death to resurrection, nothing much in between, right? And we'll talk about that a little later, so just put a pin on that thought. Having a trauma-informed perspective is really become new in the last 40 years. And really, I would say the science of it and the understanding of how that science informs how we respond to trauma and how we respond to others in trauma is really, at best, 20 years old. So a church, thinking about a congregational trauma-informed church, is really a cutting-edge notion. You can search the internet for trauma-informed churches. You're going to not find a lot, right? It's still a new concept. So what happened is in 1992, I can give you the longer history of trauma. Trauma was always either considered hysteria, women were hysterical, or it was considered, what did they call it? Shell-shocked for World War I.
The soldiers.
The soldiers were shell-shocked. And then PTSD, while it became known after the Vietnam War, they still didn't make it, that was still considered something separate from what we do, right? So Judith Hermann writes a book, Trauma and Recovery, And in that book, she had become famous for writing about father-daughter incest. But the next book, Trauma and Recovery, was really her exploration of the consequences of trauma, not just physically and but on our whole being, psychologically, what it does to our memory, what it was a psychology of it and a bit of the sociology of it. In 2010, a professor from Boston University publishes a book called Spirit and Trauma, A Theology of Remaining. And Shelley Rambo, using some of the notions, which I'm not going to outline completely here, that were in Judith Hermann's book, and begins to look at the Christian lens and say, can we have a theology of trauma, and where would that fit into the Christian story? And it'll be no secret that it fits it in around Holy Saturday. Okay, so I'm not going to hide the lead here totally. Okay. Then a psychiatrist by the name of Bessel van der Kolk writes in 2014, The Body Keeps the Score. And in that book, he begins to put together both his own experiences over the course of 40 years, beginning with combat veterans, the physiological, neurological impact of trauma on us, such that he says with quite a bit of confidence that when we are traumatized, not all events cause trauma to all persons. You know, some people can be in a car accident, walk away and go, oh, just another day in paradise. And some people are traumatized for a long time. It's about the impact, but that it is, the impact is recorded in our basic autonomic nervous system. And when you read the book, you have to follow sort of the science of it, but basically there is a sympathetic nervous system, a parasympathetic nervous system. The sympathetic nervous system is the one that speeds up the gas in our body. The lion's coming at us, we better pump up the blood rate, we better get our things going, preserve energy, so we can get away from the lion. The parasympathetic nervous system does the opposite. It depresses our responses. So that's the fight, flight, or freeze. Now, when these are working in conjunction with each other, we try to in balance, we don't even notice them. And the thing about them is they respond faster than our intellectual can keep up with what's going on. So when the lion comes at us, we really don't have time to do an entire thesis on it. Like, there's a lion, I understand the lion will kill me, so maybe I should run. You run and then think about it later, okay? See the thing? So all of these ideas together have really begun to put together the idea of trauma-informed care. And trauma-informed care is becoming part of the model of how really psychologists should handle their patients, how hospitals should run, right? Imagine you've been in a terrible traumatic event and you go to the hospital, there's ding, 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 people are opening, shutting doors, there's loud noises, all that stuff. And that can trigger a reminder. There's just different ways we think about trauma-informed care. For me, it's really exciting, though, to go back to the Bible. So this is a new science that didn't exist in biblical times, but what has been really remarkable to me is you take this and you go, oh my God, the Bible accounted for this. We just didn't know it was in there, right? The whole notion in understanding the Bible from a trauma-informed lens, I think both gives us more compassion and it opens doors or windows into this event that has been understood theologically in a very stagnant way for a long time. I mean, when our arguments are really about, is it atonement for salvation? Is it atonement is it nonviolence? I mean, these are important topics, but I think this is really a more humanist, opens it to our souls. So I gave you all the question ahead of time. Where was Jesus after he died on the cross and before he was seen by Mary Magdalene?
And I just think of growing up with the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed. I don't know which one, but it's but I can't remember exactly what it says. But like after he was crucified, he descended into, and then like it depends on which creed, but it's either he descended into hell or the dead, and it's kind of weird looking at it from a adult point of view now, because when I was a kid I never really thought that much about it. But like, what is hell, and like what does it mean to be dead? And basically it seems like, just going off of some of my own personal pain, it's just like a feeling of like a separation and a feeling of isolation, sleeping to like kind of numb the pain. Um, so yeah.
Yeah. Anyone else?
I'm kind of close, I guess, to Meredith. I'm back to the Apostles' Creed, where he descended into hell, and on the third day, then he arose from the dead and ascended into heaven.
So what
Um,
does that mean?
um,
And did he descend physically, bodily, spiritually?
I think he, I think all of them. I think, I guess I've never thought about the body.
Mhm.
Spiritually, and his soul, I believe, went to hell. I don't know about his body. I guess I don't know.
Right. Okay, so let me just follow up on that because it is the Apostles' Creed. Very good. Some of you have some, you know, Catholic other roots. Where does that come from in the Bible, though? Where is it
It
biblically?
doesn't. I don't believe it does. Just says, as far as I know in the Bible, that he would be dead for the same time as Jonah was in the belly of the great fish, which is 3 days.
So I'm going to
So
hold that thought because I kind of jumped that one on you. But so let me put it a different way, and maybe this will spark some imagination. Does anyone believe that after he died, Jesus went up to his Father in heaven, said, "Hey, high five, mission accomplished," and then came back down to earth to see the apostles? You do? I love that, Carol. Good. High five, good job. Have a little glass of wine, come back down.
I'm sitting here listening to what everyone else is sharing. I'm like, well, that's what I always believed, but I don't know if it was really an informed thought.
Okay, good. Okay, there we go. See, all answers are acceptable. This is we're disciples of Christ, sort of. So it means we can. Leslie?
I was going to say, you know, my impression from reading various authors is that time is something of this world, and that time is meaningless in the spiritual realm of things. It's just one of the limitations that we have in this world, that we only can perceive things in a moving forward through time. And I mean, this is an idea from C.S. Lewis, but I think he got it elsewhere, that God is outside of time. When we die, we are outside of time. That time is sort of like training wheels on a bicycle.
So that there really wasn't a gap between his death and his appearance? You don't think there was a gap?
And I don't, in God, and this is actually one of the things Jesus said, because he talks about, and I can't lay my hands on where this is in the scriptures. He talks about what happens when the dead arise and this sort of thing. And, he says, you're completely wrong. I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. To God, all are alive all the time.
So we're going to hold on to that notion of time is important. That notion of what does it mean to be in the realm of the dead is important. What might it mean to go into hell after a trauma? Anybody else want to pop in before we move a little bit further?
Just to kind of jump on the time thing, and it kind of made me think of sleeping, because when you sleep, you don't sense time. It's like you fall asleep and then you wake up. I don't know. That was just something that came to my mind.
Right. So, yeah, so we have to kind of, and there may be a question, why did they construct it this way? But we're going to use it a little bit metaphorically, a little bit literally. So let me just remind us kind of the lawyer time frame, right? Whenever I did a case, I knew what happened moment by moment, day by day, so I could understand it. And kind of a journalist, who, what, where, when, how, right? So, and then I'll read you a part from Matthew, okay? Because I think there is parts of the Bible that are very surrealistic, but are helpful when we talk about this subject. So, at noon in Matthew and in Luke and in Mark, darkness came upon the land. Okay. Now, one account says that he was actually put on the cross around 9 in the morning. It actually says that in the text. I read through the 4 of them this morning. And then around 3 o'clock, that's when we get the famous Jesus cries out in a loud voice, "Why have you forsaken me?" Or in John, it simply says, "And then he gave up his spirit." And then the different accounts have, either they have the thieves on the cross or different things. But I think what's important, and this we don't read very often, but I was very impressed by this. It had a very impression on me as a kid. At that moment, when he gave up his spirit, the curtain of the temple was torn from top to bottom. The earth shook, the rocks split, and the tombs broke open. The bodies of the many holy people who had died were raised to life. They came out of the tombs after Jesus' resurrection and went into the holy city and appeared to many people. Then you have a centurion going, "Surely this must have been God." Then you have Joseph, and if you add John's account, Nicodemus, who take the body and bury it and roll the stone over it. Mary Magdalene and some other women follow them, so they note where the stone is, where the burial place is, and that's a subject for another whole lecture about burial traditions in Jewish times. And then the Bible's pretty silent. The next chapters of each of the Gospels proceeds to the day after the Sabbath, okay? So let's look at these days that we celebrate as a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or honor as a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, from the Jewish perspective, because there's a lot of language about Jewish feasts and holidays embedded in this narrative, okay? So we know there is this sort of Passover in some accounts, which is the day we celebrate as the Last Supper, right? Then the next day is Friday, and it's referred to almost in all accounts as the day of preparation. What that means is they had to bury the body on that day because on Friday at sundown will be the Sabbath, and you can't do anything after the Sabbath comes. So about 3 noon, we're starting to run into Sabbath problems, right? According to Jewish calendars. From sundown on Friday till sundown on Saturday, it's the Sabbath and nothing can be done. And that's the day we call Holy Saturday. And I just remind you, in some traditions and in many traditions, the altar is emptied. It's the one day of the week where there's no mass said in the Catholic faith. A lot of churches turn out their lights at the conclusion of the Holy Thursday services, and things don't happen again till Easter sunrise, okay? And Sunday, which we celebrate as Easter, is the first day of the week on the Jewish calendar, okay? So sometimes, just from practical purposes, I think the story is fed out just to meet Jewish calendar preferences, but I'm not really trying to, this isn't a study about what really happened and how did the Bible account for this, because the metaphor is really powerful. So as some of you said, descended into hell is the idea that comes into mind. And that is the Apostles' Creed, where he says Jesus was crucified, died, and was buried. he descended into hell, and on the third day he rose again from the dead. And the word again is in there, so I copied it. He ascended into heaven and is seated at the right hand of God, the Father Almighty. Okay? And the ascension, we know, takes place, 40 days after his reappearance on earth, okay? Now, where does this descent into hell come from? And there is, you're right, it's not clearly biblical, but there's a number of references, particularly in the writings of Paul, that suggest this. And from the Jewish tradition of, well, what happened, which Leslie's kind of referred to, what happened to all those people who died before this gift of salvation? Are they going to be saved? So you have a merging of a couple of problems that they're trying to solve. So in 1 Peter 3, 18 to 20, but I'm just reading really parts of 18 and 19, he was put to death in the flesh, but made alive in the spirit. Anybody recognize that language? It's Gnostic language, right? He was put to death in the flesh, even though it's from Paul, but made alive in the spirit, in which he went and made a proclamation to the spirits in prison. This notion that he went and spoke to spirits that are trapped somehow, right? Then I found out, which I didn't really know, there's also, we call it the Heroine of Hell. That's from the Gospel of Nicodemus. Who knew there was a Gospel of Nicodemus, right? But there is. And that gospel is its own detailed exploration of what happened to Jesus after he died and made this, where'd he go? What did he do? And I really haven't had a chance to fully read it, but I'm going to read you a couple of verses from it, okay? And you can see it does influence our theology. Even it's considered an apocryphal gospel, but I'm not sure it's in all of the apocryphas that are collected. Joseph says, and this is the first line, and why do you wonder that Jesus has risen? But it is wonderful that he has not risen alone, but that he has also raised many of the others of the dead who have appeared in Jerusalem to many. This comports with what we just read from Matthew. And if you do not know the others, Simeon at least, who received Jesus, and his two sons, whom he has raised up, at least you know them. I'm going to skip a line. And then at chapter 2, it looks like a verse 18. O Lord Jesus Christ, the resurrection and life of the world, grant us grace that we may give an account of thy resurrection and thy miracles which thou did in Hades, when then we were in Hades with all who had fallen asleep since the beginning of the world. And what they talk about is he brings them back to life, and he includes them back into the whole of what's going on in the course of this resurrection. That's where this sort of notion of what did he do, where did he go, how do we incorporate Abraham and Moses and Elijah and everybody into this event or this new beginning of Jesus if they've already died? And that was a big worry at the time. We may not think of it as a big worry, but it was very much a worry of people. Would they be left behind, right? Not to use left behind, but that's kind of what they were worried about. I think in simplest form, what we have is, it may be easiest to understand that in some sense, I think he entered a realm of death, and that's what they mean by Hades or hell, as opposed to that place of punishment, eternal damnation. They mean more of the realm of death, and what does that mean, and with whom did he encounter? So I would pull up the middle row, the fourth one over.
This one? This
Yeah.
one?
Mm-hmm. I like that one. Or the one you have the arrow on now, that's a good one.
This one?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Can you all see that?
Okay.
So
Down there, cool.
for you artists in the group, but the fact that there are all these images These were done in the 13th century, 14th century, whatever. This is a big concept that's not played up very much now, but that Jesus had business to do. He wasn't necessarily, Carol, I'm sorry to say, up there partying with God, although I like to think of it that way. How we get back to Leslie's concept is this notion of time, not that it doesn't exist, but this notion of pulling in the past, because now we're going to make our turn into trauma, okay? How do the past, Jesus goes into the past, into time, whether that's in the realm of the dead, and brings the past into the present, that place of the new world that Jesus, the new order that Jesus is creating, so that they might go into the future with us, right? So it becomes important to recognize that you have past, present, and future are getting intermingled in the way we think about what happened Holy Saturday. Let's think about that. And I'm going to note that all of us pretty much know that the PTSD or trauma, the traumatic consequences, and particularly for PTSD, is flashbacks and nightmares, right? Meaning that when you're in this moment in time, you suddenly feel as if, or respond as if, you're back actually in the traumatic event. So the traumatic event keeps interfering with the present moment. And some people cannot move forward until they integrate those two things, which is so that the past does not continue to interfere with the present. So you're always transferring back and forth in time. So this notion of where is Jesus in time also works metaphorically for trauma, because traumatized people are, where are they in time? Where's this trigger coming from? Even if you're not having a flashback, it's coming from something embedded in your body in the past that's intruding on the present that may keep you from moving into the future. I'm going to pause right there. Are you with me so far? Let that sink in. Interesting, huh? All right. I'll get you excited about this subject as I am, okay? Hold tight.
Time traveling Jesus. That's exciting.
Time traveling Jesus, yes. So, and trauma is a time traveling disease, really. Theologically, what I want to talk about is how we tend to, in modern, particularly Protestant culture, talk about death and resurrection. He died, he rose. Boom. Good. We're going straight to the praise, straight to the resurrection, straight to the glory days, straight to the joy, right? We barely pause at Good Friday to go, oh, he died. Now, if you're in a higher church Christology, and for those of you who've seen it, they march through the streets with the cross. There's you spend the hour from noon to 3 in complete silence. There's some rituals for Good Friday, but this race to resurrection, right? We want our Christianity to be happy. We want our Christianity to be joyful. We don't want to wallow in sorrows. In fact, probably many of us were told, don't complain, tough it out. We'll get to the next point, right? So think about it. What do you hear being said to people who are in a tough time? Anybody want to tell me? Because you know the answer.
Thoughts and prayers.
It'll be better soon.
It's for the best.
For the best.
Try to keep your mind off of it.
Try to keep your mind off of it.
In a better place.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
How does it make the person to whom that is being said feel? And if you've had that said to you, how did you feel? Anyone else?
Wasn't helpful.
Inadequate.
Inadequate. And I think, Jill, you've talked about it sometimes. It does not take care of the problem. And I can tell you, as a chaplain in the hospital with families, it's trying to struggle with them through that theology that is often, when A, a really good trained chaplain is most needed, and B, causes a lot of trouble, because he'll go, why is this happening to me? My friends tell me to be good. it'll be all right. And it's not going to be all right, or at least I don't feel like it's going to be all right. But I would argue, oh, sorry, I would submit, no, that's not a good word either. I would suggest that the Christian faith is not a faith of death to resurrection. It is a faith where there is an aftermath to trauma and a period of time of waiting, witnessing, wondering, walking with, until we get to that moment of the beginning of transformation and new life that we have completely passed over by the way we have constructed our religions and cycles. And I'm saying it now in my own words because I've embodied it. Shelley Rambo, certainly, it's a very thick book, thick, dense, hard, but when you get it, it's quite remarkable. But what we know about trauma is that anyone who has experienced a loss or grief or trauma, and we all have, so I'm not excluding anyone, I'm just offering a space for you. Does anyone feel like they've been in hell after a trauma? The anticipation of death can be equally traumatizing, right? So it's not a literal metaphor, death to resurrection, but that death is the key, but that whenever we undergo a significant change in our life, it can have consequences that feel like hell. If anybody suffered abuse as a child, you may know that, or I did, and I suffered from depression for many years. Depression is like being in hell. You're withdrawn, you can't function. You do function. People don't even know sometimes that you are, but if you've lost somebody you loved, that period afterwards, in the aftermath of the event, whatever the event is for you, the grief and the loss and the discomfort, whatever that is, it feels like hell. So I think it's very fitting that after Jesus dies, there's a period in which we undergo sort of a hell. Where is he? What happened to him? What's going to happen to us? The disciples go into hiding. The women are trying to find where he's buried so they might put rights and take care of him. There's this uncertainty about what's going to happen next. There's fear. There's anxiety, right? There's a whole host of things going on that also can be likened to what happens in the aftermath of trauma. Disorientation, fear of the unknown, uncertainty about the future. You have lost something, life as you knew it before the traumatic event or events, that you know you can never be the same after the traumatic event. So does Jesus ever come back to being the Jesus we knew that went on the cross? Does he ever return to that form? So many of us who undergo trauma or traumatic events or grief, huge losses, that loss is a point when your life will never be the same as it was before. No matter how many times people say we're going to return to normal after COVID, that is actually a complete misunderstanding of what an event like COVID does to all of us. We can never return to where we were before, if only because we've experienced this isolation and event known as COVID. That it's changed our lives. So I'm just beginning to build kind of the metaphorical building of how we can begin to think of those days of Easter as an event, a traumatic event that changes everything forever. Once Jesus is crucified and died, what everybody thought beforehand is not what's going to happen afterwards. There's a struggle to know what to do, where he is. Mary's crying in John to this supposed gardener, "Where have they taken my Lord?" Which reflects the uncertainty and anxiety, which is extremely parallel for anyone who's experienced trauma, particularly acute stress or PTSD. And then the question is, how do you get to new life? And that's what Christianity offers us, I think, is not, and I'll read next week some quotes from Shelley Rambo, but Christianity doesn't offer us a return before the cross. And I don't think it offers us this joyous, let's all eat together and life will be fine. But it offers us the hope of a new life, a new way of being, grounded in what we begin to understand was the purpose of Jesus, right? So as we begin to understand that the strength was in the weakness, where the meek shall inherit the earth. But that new life is, even once he's seen, it's transformational. It builds on itself. It's not that there's joy, but there's confusion even, right? And I think Amy's going to talk about it next week. They don't believe they've seen him. They're not going to believe until they touch his wounds. There isn't this just sudden jump to resurrection. When we learn to understand that, we actually treat people with traumas or ourselves more compassionately. When we don't say, oh, it's going to be better, but say, let me sit with you and be with you. And I'm here with you to walk alongside you, not rush you through this journey because your time frame is not good for me. I need you to get better fast. No, they need us to sit with them, whatever it takes, as they undergo this transformation. When we understand that, I think it returns a strong Christian compassion, which is to walk alongside our Christian fellows and not demand that they be happy or sad, but to say there is sadness, there's anxiety, but always, as Henry Now would say, we always offer the hope that the hope is founded in that we will be with each other always and companions on the journey. I'll recognize your humanity, you'll recognize mine.
It sounds like what we're talking about is a broken attachment. So like in therapy, you have family, you have people, you have friends that you love and that you're attached to. And then when those people go away, then we grieve and we feel, loss responses. And it just makes me see more how, because I wrote down a question about how do we see the trauma focus show up in scripture. And, I wanted you to say more about that, but it's just making my mind continue to think about why we decided that establishing a relational community of church was important, because we're noticing that the Spirit wants us to be like this instead of like this. And it's that the attachment piece that I think Jesus is trying to show us, and it shows so well. Like Jill was just saying, we get so much from the group. We get so much coming up of that's programmed into all of us. And as a group, we're like a supercomputer. So like in each individual, one of us is like a computer, but when we get together and process, it becomes a whole different thing. Mm-hmm. And I'm seeing more and more why this kind of discussion is so valuable, so that we find safety in each other, and then we are leaving the world
Better than we left it.
Yeah.
There's a simple way to help contribute to the church, and that is to remember to share things that are posted on your various social media resources. Because if you're benefiting, as I think we all are from this conversation, there are many others that would.
Like and subscribe.
It doesn't even take a minute. It takes a click of the button.
Yes.
So go for it. All right. Back to regular programming.